Manchester United's owners, the Glazer family, had set a soft deadline for submissions of bids for them to actually sell the club, and that the deadline for those bids was last Friday. Now, since then, there's only formally been two major bids that have been lodged and confirmed, not just by the media, but by the people who've lodged the bids themselves. Now, both of those bids really are interesting in their own ways, have their own pros and cons, but for very obvious reasons, the one of greater interest is the one that comes from the state of Qatar. Now again, we have covered how it is that it would be possible for Qatar to own both PSG and Manchester United and have them compete in the same competitions, or UEFA competitions to be specific. We've done that in an old video. You can check that out later on. But for now, if you're on this video, we're going to be talking about how it is that amazingly the Premier League, one of the biggest leagues in the world, one of the most commercially successful and most watched around the world, is now or could become a potential hub for sports washing, especially for the Middle Eastern nations. How exactly is that the case? Well, to answer that question, we'll first have to look at Manchester United's, the process that they've put in place for putting in bids for the club and for a sale of the club. So the process so far has been simple. There have been two major bids that have been made by two particular parties. The first of those really comes from Jim Ratcliffe, who most people would know is in fact the person who heads up the company Ineos, which also is owns other football clubs and also owns a stake in the Mercedes Formula One team. So Jim Ratcliffe is a lifelong Manchester United fan, but he has actually demonstrated an interest in buying a football club in England, because even when Chelsea were being sold, he was interested but was eventually outbid by the Todd Bowley-led Clear Lake Capital Consortium. But the second bid is the one of bigger interest, is because it comes from Sheikh Jassim of Qatar. Now, if you're asking yourself, who's Sheikh Jassim? It would be a very, very good question to ask yourself, because there isn't that much that's known publicly about the man. And aside from maybe his links to Qatar's banking, there's very little in the public domain that is known about him, although there are media reports that say that he has been a United fan for a long time. But again, the implications of a sale like that are evident for all to see. And what it does is it ends up making England, of all countries, a political battlefield for exerting soft power from the Middle East. How so, you'd ask? Well, really, it comes down to three major things, and in fact, it comes down to three major clubs in the Premier League right now, those being Manchester City, Newcastle United, and Manchester United. You would have Manchester City, which are owned by UAE. You note for a fact that the Abu Dhabi-based City Group are their owners and have been so since 2008. And they've transformed them from a club that were at best a middling in the league to a team that really is the benchmark for high standards in the Premier League. Newcastle United were recently bought off by the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. So they too have seen a major cash injection come in, and they went from being a club that were battling relegation every season to potentially finishing in the top 4 this season itself. They also have a Carabao Cup final up against none other than Manchester United. Speaking of, they could be owned by Qatar. Now, what that does actually is that's three major Middle Eastern countries, and you think that okay, great, you have three Middle Eastern countries there, so what? The point is that all of these three countries have had some rather complicated relations in the past, let's say. So many countries have previously kind of rallied against Qatar. There have been issues between Qatar and UAE, and Qatar and Saudi Arabia. So there's been plenty of issues, and really what it comes down to is all of these nations, these Gulf nation states, are trying to use sports for one particular thing and one particular thing only, and that is sports washing. Now, if you're not familiar with the term sports washing, worry not, we have you covered. Sports washing is basically or essentially the misuse of sport for exertion of soft power. We've been seeing it happen a lot in sport in recent years. What happens is, it could be any kind of a repressive regime. By the way, it doesn't just have to be the Middle East. They'll end up hosting sporting events, major sporting events in the nation, or they'll invest in major sporting events. and then they'll spread goodwill about their own countries. So sport, or using sport for soft power, is a very common tool that has been used a lot of times. You've had 3 FIFA World Cups that were basically sports washing World Cups, 4 actually if you count Qatar in 2022. So it does happen more often than you think, and unfortunately or otherwise, England's top flight, the Premier League, is becoming a very key example of that. Aside from, of course, as I said, the 3 clubs that, or 2 clubs and the third that could potentially be owned by the Middle East. You have Arsenal, whose shirt sponsors are Emirates and whose stadium sponsors are Emirates as well. So it's not as if the influence hasn't been spreading already. So there is plenty of influence, but when it comes down to the ownership aspect of things, it does become evident that the goal is eventually exerting soft power. You've seen that with Manchester City, you're seeing it with Newcastle United, you've seen it with Qatar and Paris Saint-Germain as well, and you could very well be seeing it now come to Manchester United too. That is really, when it comes down to, the major issue. And if it does happen, it's going to be one very bizarre reality, in that sense that you'd have 3 Middle Eastern nations all using the exact same sporting competition to exert soft power. Yes, I know that a lot of people believe, and it's a valid opinion if you ask me, the sport and politics shouldn't really be that intertwined. There should be some sort of a mix. A lot of people use sport to escape the everyday realities of their lives, and bringing politics in might seem like a bit of a chore, but unfortunately, in this case, it's not us bringing in the politics, it's politics entering sports themselves, because the very fact that these clubs are all owned, or could very well be owned in Manchester United's case, by these Middle Eastern powers is nothing else but a power grab to use sports washing as a political tool to spread an agenda across the world. Yes, I know there are certain Manchester United fans who might think we don't really care about that, we just want money in the club, and that's a valid claim, but as purveyors, or as in fact the custodians of a sport that has the power to change the world, that is so popular the world over, it does actually fall on us as fans to be a little more responsible with who it is that we welcome into the sport. Whether that happens, it remains to be seen, because it really does seem like Qatar owning Manchester United could be going full speed forward, but if it does, it will sadly be a very unfortunate time for not just Manchester United, who will have gone from being owned by horrible owners and the Glazers to then being owned by Qatar, but also for the Premier League in general, which will become the hub of sports washing across the globe, because you'd have not 1, not 2, but 3 Middle Eastern powers all trying to use the league to spread their own soft power messages, or at least that's how I feel about it. What do you guys think? You can let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, tap the bell icon, leave us a comment as well, as I said before, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Also download the AajTak app. You'll get more such updates from that app as well at the tip of your fingers. And if you're already on our channel, why not go ahead, check out some other videos as well. Thank you so much once again for joining us. For now though, from our side, I hope you enjoyed this video, but for now, goodbye.